it's not just one bomb that comes and kills you dramatically and that's your life is over. It's actually something that grinds you to the core day after day, minute after minute, when you can't do laundry or when you can't use the restroom. Because if there is no water, it's not just the fridge and all your food is going bad. The bathrooms are not working. Big amounts of money involved. It's not just compromise that Putin has on Trump and that the Kremlin and the former KGB, now FSB, have on Trump. Former Putin's aide, Vladislav Surkov, said a few years ago, "We are not meddling into your elections and referendums. We are meddling within your brain." My name is Zarina Zabrisky. I'm an American journalist, writer, and filmmaker. I'm based in Ukraine right now, and I'm a war correspondent for Byline Times. I've been asked them quite a lot, especially just arriving to London now. People want to know, and I have an answer that I'm afraid I've given before to some people. If anybody is telling you that they know what's going to happen, they are not telling you the truth. I believe that at this point, nobody has the ability to know what is going to happen. The situation is very complex and it's multidimensional. It's geopolitics. We have way more than just two players, two actors, the aggressor country, the Russian Federation, and Ukraine that is being invaded. We have all the allies. We have all the other wars and conflicts going on in the world. We also have factors like climate change and artificial intelligence. And if you're not taking in consideration one of these factors, and some of them are not known to us, we are just speculating. So I'm not going to speculate. I'd much rather focus on the current situation analysis. It is very difficult to be optimistic after 11 years of continuing aggression, of the war that's been ravaging the country from 2014, and that from 2022 pretty much devastated the life as is in Ukraine. Despite that, believe it or not, Ukrainians are still somewhat optimistic, although way less than they were in the beginning, just because, like you mentioned, they are very tired and their resources are being depleted. And just daily life, Sean, is very difficult. I'll just give you an example because for now it's just words, and it's hard to imagine how you might live your life if another country wants to destroy yours. In the morning, you wake up and you don't have electricity, you don't have heat in the winter, or you don't have air conditioning if it's a heat wave in summer. You don't have water. So you can't brush your teeth, you can't make coffee unless you have gas. Some people do and some don't. And as you are realizing that there's very little you can do to start your work day because you still have to work and make some money to pay bills because nobody canceled the bills, you are hearing a siren. And that means that either swarms of Shahed, which are Iranian-made large drones, come into your city, say, of Odessa or Kiev, or these are aerial bombs, which are giant, monstrous bombs that leave huge craters. If you say in Kharkov, or you are in the Kherson region, or in Sumy region, close enough for the Russians to send these guided aerial bombs. Or it could be the whole country under the missile attack. And for that, you could be somewhere as far as the Carpathian Mountains, very close to Poland. Well, 30 minutes to Poland border, to the Polish border, and there would still be a missile whistling and flying over your head and, say, destroying the infrastructure facility in the place, say, like Chernobyl the other day. And the day continues, and you get some text messages from your relatives or friends whose loved ones were either injured or killed, either at the front in the army or in the peaceful cities, the civilians. And then you get messages that your friend's house in Kherson was destroyed because it's under attack again. And then there's the next air raid, because there could be up to 10 a day, or they could be continuous. Sometimes they last for hours. And if they do, Sean, you can't go to a grocery store because they close in most places, not everywhere. In Donbass, they don't close anymore, or in Kherson, they don't close for air raids. But in Kiev, you can go inside of the store because it's closed and everybody's standing outside or going for shelter in metro. And it continues like this. And it goes on and on and on. And it's what I'm trying to get to here, that it's not just one bomb that comes and kills you dramatically, and that's your life is over. It's actually, it's something that grinds you to the core day after day, minute after minute, when you can't do laundry, or when you can't use the restroom. Because if there is no water, it's not just the fridge and all your food is going bad. The bathrooms are not working. Back to your question, are people still optimistic? Yes, in a way that they can stand all this, they adapt, and they are not willing to give their independence and sovereignty to the aggressor country. And it's very often that you hear people repeating a phrase that I heard from a woman on the day of liberation of Kherson, who said, "We have no electricity, no water, no power, no gas, but we are free." And that's pretty much what it boils down to. Well, this is another brilliant question, and I think we're going to get back to it once we speak about the Kremlin narratives and Russian propaganda, because that question and this word belongs exactly to the lexicon and vocabulary of the Kremlin playbook and brainwashing material. And here we see how they're trying and succeeding actually to brainwash the international audience and brainwash the West, the East, global South, English-speaking or non-Ukrainians, right, and non-Russian world outside of the direct war involvement. Because ceasefire sounds good. Yes, it has a good, like the fire ceases a good, nobody dies anymore. And it's easy to tweak the minds this way, and we'll speak about it more a little later during our conversation. But basically, what's important to remember here is getting back to reality. That will mean that millions of Ukrainians will be left under the Russian occupation. And these millions of Ukrainians are suffering daily oppression, daily murder, daily torture. And what is one of the worst part about this war, is their identity, their national identity is being erased slowly and sometimes even peacefully, seemingly, because the kids in the occupied areas are being educated by using the Russian textbooks, Russian military camps, Russian overall strategies and narratives again, telling them, very young children, started as young as kindergartens, 3, 4, 5, that they are Russians, that Ukraine doesn't exist, that there's no such language, and other such myths and completely false facts, because actually Ukrainian history goes further back than the Russian, but nobody bothers with the facts. And if you're raised that way, it is very hard to establish your own frame of mind and your own worldview. And thus, turning millions of Ukrainians into Russians, the Kremlin is intending to win this war, in which their goal is to make Ukraine Russia. And that's why ceasefire is not this nice, fluffy, white ceasefire we want to imagine. It's actually murder and genocide. Okay, so here we're taking it on a more geopolitical level, which is great, right? Like in the beginning of our conversation, I did mention that we have multiple players here and a lot of factors that we won't have ability to see now. But this is one factor that everybody is focusing on now. Everybody knows that on the 20th of January, things will change. The Russians know it, the Ukrainians know it, and the rest of the world knows it. I don't know what Trump knows. It's hard to tell. I'm an American. I lived under Trump for 4 years previously. It was pretty horrible, I can tell you that. It wasn't horrible in the way the war horrible in Ukraine, but it's pretty devastating to your psyche when you live under a dictator wannabe who's looking up to the existing dictators like Putin and other dictators of the world. And we know that already. We also know from the work that we did for Byline Times, and I've been writing for these newspapers for 8 years, ever since it started to be a newspaper. We know from all the investigative work that we have done that there is big amounts of money involved. It's not just compromise that Putin has on Trump and that the Kremlin and the former KGB, now FSB, have on Trump. There's dependence on the money, and we also know it because it's not exactly a secret. When Trump won the elections, there was a very interesting series of communications from Putin and his close circles. Right after Trump's victory, Putin did not address him directly, but he was given one of his 3-hour speeches, and within the speech, he said, well, Trump is a very courageous man. I do want to engage with him. I'm quoting Putin here now. And look at how well he handled the assassination attempt on him. We definitely want to speak to him. And for somebody who's not familiar with mafia state talk, we can refer to Godfather movies or any films about mafia. This is a veiled threat. If you were saying, no, can't be, you're just admiring him, let's follow up. The next day, Patrushev, who's very close to Putin and he's like a former FSB, had offers official interview to the one of the biggest newspapers in Russia, Kommersant, which is then republished by TASS, which is the major information agency in Russia. And the first question in this interview, which actually is about something entirely different, goes about Donald Trump. And Patrushev says in it that Donald Trump owes his victory to certain agencies or certain groups that helped him to achieve these results. And he will be reasonable and sensible enough to return the favor, to stand up to these commitments. And here comes the next question. And these questions are scripted, right? It's not like you and I. I didn't tell you what to ask me. There they do. And the next question is like, what if the deep state, like of which they speak often in the States, prevent Donald Trump from actually making this commitment happen? And Patrushev says, well, he will have to be very, very careful because we know that there were already 4 attempts on the life of sitting presidents, of the presidents in the office. And if that is not enough and you're still not convinced, just a couple of days ago, Putin, in his speech in Kazakhstan, in Astana, said that with a very frightened kind of mock and face, what really shocked me is not just the attempt on Donald Trump's life, because he's not safe. He's definitely not safe. But there are threats that were made to his family members. And that, this is 3 strikes. If you're still not convinced, I don't know how to convince you. You probably will never be convinced. But of course, we can go down that path and discuss whether the Russians have ability to assassinate the presidents of the United States. But for that, I can refer you to all the cases that we had here in the United Kingdom and in Europe and in America. Yes, Russians have this ability. What do I try to tell you here in this mafia story is that Trump will be working alongside Putin. There might be some political theater where they would look like they're disagreeing. It's unlikely, but it could happen because both do that. But overall, I'm absolutely convinced that there will be lifting of sanctions from the Russian Federation, and they already spoke about that they will be talking about freezing the borders at the existing front lines. And this is why Russians are pushing now in Donbass and Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast and in the Zaporizhia and Kherson region, because they want to catch and capture as much land as possible in strategic positions. So when Trump comes, they could, establish that line. Overall, the situation will be very favorable to the Russians. There might be even some twist which we do not see exactly, with some executive orders signed by Trump, where suddenly we be in the United States partnering practically with the Kremlin. It's not impossible, strange as it sounds. What do Ukrainians think about that? It's a good question, and usually Ukrainians are very savvy when it comes to geopolitics or hybrid war and its dangers, because they've been at it for over 10 years. They understand the secret language. They know the threats. They know where facts are, more or less, and where the Kremlin narratives are. But when it comes to Trump and when it comes to the situation in the States, they are actually not really comprehending the exact scale of this cooperation, because it's very hard for some concept to settle in the mind. The powerful United States actually is cooperating with the Russian Federation, with the Kremlin. Everybody was basically too busy to follow the money and all the shadow deals that we at Byline Times, and I recommend the audience to look up our archives with facts, with investigative journalism that we have, showing that there's money involvement between these two entities. Ukrainians don't have time or capacity to go into that, and they want to trust that something good is going to happen. That's almost psychological, and they want to trust Trump. Also, part of it is the language barrier, because when Trump's gibberish is translated, usually the translators make it sound a little bit more palatable and coherent than it is. And he sounds more, intelligent is the word that doesn't go with Trump, but more with it than when we hear it directly. So that's the combination. It's a terrifying thought. It's irrational. It almost doesn't doesn't want to register there. But you have to look into history. It's an improbable thought. But that's what the former KGB, then FSB, of which Putin is a part, were working on for such a long time. And such a big part of it is not either political or economic or anywhere from the realm of rational. A lot of it is just pure psychology. Part of it is Putin's personal intimidation and feeling, the inferiority complex, if you will, and his whole apparatus, when they don't feel, that includes Putin and his close circles, that they are given the time of the day. They don't feel valued enough. And this whole project of turning the West and showing the domination of Russia, it's a part of the psychological, not even game, but obsession, need. Because let's take one quick detour and look at Putin as is. He's an old man, right? I mean, not to be an ageist, but just going by the numbers. He's over 70. He's in good shape relatively. He's got the best medical care in the world, but he's not in the starting part of his life. He is looking at the aftermath, more or less, of his whole career. And he has reached the top, seemingly, right? He has the riches, he has the power, he has, one way or another, again, we'll come back to brainwashing and propaganda, but the love, twisted love of his people. He captured all this. So what else might he want? And it's very clear from listening to him or reading whatever, he sometimes writes articles or op-eds, that he wants to go into history. He's afraid of death. There's a fear of death, which is universal. And he wants to immortalize himself by going into history as one of the greatest military commanders in the world, like Alexander the Great or Napoleon. And for that, he needs to conquer as much as possible and rewrite the history books. That's the only way he can stay in a way, right, that makes sense. And that's what he's trying to do so hard. A part of it has to do with this whole Russian culture, which considers itself great. No one country is greater than another. No one culture is greater than another. But Russian culture has this complex of being great, which is probably also an inferiority complex to compensate. And that's the whole great Russian culture, the the mystery of the Russian soul, and all these cliches that is out there, and also a part of the Kremlin narratives right now, because they've been weaponized for that. All of this is a toolbox with which, just as a ceasefire, for instance, and verbal, right, vocabulary toolbox, which they're trying to use to turn us and to get even one way or another. Great question, Sean, and I'm happy to tell you, not so happy that that happens. So happy might not be the right word here, but we're getting a little bit of a scoop here, and I'm working on an article right now, soon to come, some investigation to be done here, that in addition to now conventional and traditional ways of spreading propaganda, which is in our age is digital, right? Social media, specific to Ukraine and Russia, Telegram channels. And it's like slowly starting to make its appearance in the West as well. But it's just another platform. It's no different in that way from X, former Twitter, or Facebook, or now Blue Sky, or anything else. It's just a platform. But there is something very interesting that I came across about a week ago, by now 10 days perhaps, and that is in the southern city of Kherson, which is a frontline city in which I'm based most of my time, although I do travel. And in another town, the town of Nikopol in Dnipropetrovsk region, but very closely located to Zaporizhia, the city of Zaporizhia, and across the Dnipro River from Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. These two places have in common the proximity to the Russian troops. Most places do not experience attacks by small drones, what are generally known as wedding drones, right? The little tiny things that you can buy in a toy store. So these drones have been used massively by both sides, by Ukrainians and the Russian sides. And Ukrainians started to use them first, mostly, and Russians picked up on that, and there's always a bit of a competition going on. But I'm not going to go into the military aspect of that. There is what recently has been discovered, strangely by me. I, at the time, was the only foreign journalist in the city of Kherson, which Byline Times broke the story on the 29th of July. It took a little bit for the world press to catch up because it was a concept too improbable to conceive, but which is now known as human safari. Just today, there's a big article in Financial Times. There's every major newspaper or TV channel by now have written about it. What is it? These are small drones, FPV drones, wedding drones, mark drones, that are hunting civilians, as horrible as it sounds, in the streets. Just to give you a very brief overview, they chase people down the street, pedestrians. They chase people on bicycles. They chase cars a lot. And they also chase public buses, ambulances, volunteers, pretty much anyone, anything that moves. In the street of Kherson region, Nikopol, the Sumy region, which is close to the border where Ukrainian captured some territories in the Kursk region of Russia. The same goes to Donetsk, Kharkov, anywhere along the border where drones can fly. And now being re-equipped and advanced, they can fly. Debatable, I heard different numbers, but typically 15 kilometers. They also drop napalm-like substances and start fires and incinerate whole blocks in residential areas. And they also destroy forests massively. That's ecocide already, which I've seen and reported on in the Sumy region, and it happens in the Kharkov region as well. They also drop anti-infantry mines. Here we come back after this big loop to your question. They also drop leaflets. They drop material propaganda in the streets. So here I have a little anecdote. I live in the building very close to the central square in Kherson, and I know pretty much everyone in my building and the little grocery store nearby because there are not that many people left. So when I go to buy some water or apples or whatnot, I chat to the ladies who work there, and they know that I do this research on drones. And they sometimes help me, and they said, Zarina, do you know that there was a drone that fell in the central market and dropped the pamphlets or leaflets? So I went there, it was raining, and I found the little tiny pieces torn and wet, so I couldn't read exactly what they were saying. And I was really, really driven to find out because, the question is, what is the material propaganda? How are they trying to use this advanced technology with this very old technology from World War I? And I was really fascinated, and I found a crater, small crater from a drone. I found this wet little dirty pieces on the ground, and I couldn't find them because the police already came and picked them up. And so I decided to resort to going through the trash, in the trash cans. And this is by a bus station. It's pretty filthy, right? To any bus station, but it is a war zone, less than a kilometer from the front line, that's constantly being bombed in the city that's been living in the war for almost 3 years. It is not pretty. Although I'm from San Francisco, so if anybody visited downtown, West isn't for that. And as I about to dive into the trash can, and I record a little video saying, here I am, into the trash I go, some very nice lady comes out of a kiosk and she says, like, Miss, don't do that. She heard me talking. It's like, I have this piece of the leaflets, and she gave me the part. And it was a little damaged, but pretty much the whole text was there, and it had a QR code. So as opposed to the materials that they used with the first planes in World War I and then later in World War II, this one is equipped with a QR code, so you can actually follow it, which will take you to Telegram. This one was like digital Russian partisans, Russian resistance in Ukraine. Fake, obviously. I mean, there are collaborators and there are people who are working for money for the Russians. There are some who have the beliefs, especially older people who go back to the Soviet Union. There are people like this. They are tiny minority, especially in the city of Kherson, which was occupied and devastated. There are very few, but they are out there, and I guarantee you these are not the people who are maintaining this channel. This channel is very clearly maintained by the trained propagandists, political technologists, and all the posts lead to that. And the leaflet itself and the channel is saying, we're here in Russian, not in Ukrainian. We're here, we're watching you, we're everywhere, we know what you're doing, we're gonna destroy everybody who is in our way, we're coming soon. That's a psyop, to sow panic, to say, we're here, we're about to kill you if you don't start working for us, if you don't connect with us on this link and start telling us about your military positions or whatever the information we might need, you soon will be killed. So that's terrorizing the civilians. And that's how it works. That's a new twist. I started to look into it. It's a very interesting new subject. If anybody listening to it has a tip, please contact me on that. It's unlikely because it's very local, very specific. But I know that these leaflets were dropped in the other regions as well. I got the materials, and I'm looking forward to putting together the evidence and research this topic further. I know. It's a very good question. Actually, anyone can know, because I have a video that I shared on my ex account with a young lady whose building was bombed, destroyed, a playground in the yard destroyed, little carousels destroyed, had later had this leaflets dropped on her and in the close vicinity, saying that first they destroy us and then they tell us that they're brotherly people who love us. I mean, if you have eyes, you're not going to believe it. That having been said, and I don't think we'll have time to go in depth into that, but there's a psychological mechanism that might actually result into turning some, just to very briefly describe it, Stockholm syndrome, when certain parts of the brain stop functioning properly after being exposed to a certain amount of pain or torture or suffering. And that might be the mechanism or the reasoning behind it as well. Yeah, so the English language, because we have to remember there are huge fronts out there in different languages: Spanish, Chinese, French, Africa. We have to be specific here. So if we're talking about like what they call Anglo-Saxons, and that's like, now we get into this topic which I've been well, that's not the only, definitely not my favorite topic, but that I have been writing about before the full-scale invasion, and that is hybrid war and the toolbox of the Russian propaganda. And again, on Byline Times, we have one of seminal works is the Kremlin toolbox, which has about 17, I believe, Russian strategies and tactics explained. And I think it could be very useful if you're not familiar or if you want to do further research. They use the word Anglo-Saxon, which for anybody who studied history is absurd, because these are tribes. that used to roam here. And if you listen in Russian to the Russian propaganda channel, you will hear this word every 2 seconds. You are Anglo-Saxon. Most of our audience listening now would be described as Anglo-Saxons. And in that realm, Russians are definitely trying to undermine the existing notions in very tricky and clandestine, subdued ways that are not always obvious and clear to the public. I studied literature in school, and my major work, one of major works, was on William Blake's The Songs of Innocence and Experience, which I, throughout my life find very useful in many areas of my life. And strangely studying propaganda, because there's innocence and there is experience. And the experience cannot teach the innocence. This experience is basically not transferable. You cannot teach someone on some level what you have experienced in life. There would be some kind of defense mechanism, some kind of closed channel that will not let that knowledge pass through. And parents probably know that. You cannot teach your teenagers certain things, like not drinking, like you name it, many things. And that's the same type of mechanism with propaganda. The mind refuses to believe certain things. And I think that here we go into the intricacies of the brain work, and the brain can't know itself, and it becomes very dense and very twisted here. The Russians know it. They had these technologies for decades, if not for hundreds, at least 100 years by now, and they use it and they advance it. And at this point, they use digital age advancements and technologies, and now the artificial intelligence. So if, say, in 2016, when the troll factories run by Prigozhin, who since then got killed by Putin, were running their mill to push Trump to become a president, nobody would believe that because it was too fantastical a notion. Later, it became easier to prove that they did because they made a lot of mistakes, linguistic mistakes, language mistakes. They would use wrong articles, like I'm fluent in English, I only write in English, I think in English, I dream in English, but I learned it from teachers who were not native speakers, and I would occasionally skip an article or have my own article idea. And by that, at the time, we could say, oh, this is a Russian troll. By now, by using artificial intelligence, anybody goes on ChatGPT and all your articles are in place. And of course, then you can spot artificial intelligence, but then try and prove that this is Russian-used artificial intelligence. You won't be able to trace it. It's becoming more and more tricky to prove it. And there are way more and more channels with deepfake videos, with, advancements in Photoshops and such. At some point, our reality, I'm afraid, will be very hard to determine and to define. We'll have to doubt pretty much everything because, as Peter Pomerantsev wrote, everything is possible and nothing is real. And it's a quote from Nietzsche, but it's a very good book on propaganda that I really, really recommend. And it's getting more and more so as we develop. So because the Russians are focusing on that, investing shameless, obscene amount of oil and gas money into that. And our side is not doing very, very little to confront that, to study it, or to even pay attention to it. Our side being the innocence and theirs being the experience. We are, I'm afraid, losing. Here at Byline Times, we've been paying attention to it for over 8 years. That's one of our strengths. But even we can't cover it as much. We have limited resources. There are other newspapers that go into it. Now it's becoming more and more mainstream. People have the recognition of it. But not to overquote the Russian leaders and their aides, but former Putin's aide, Vladislav Surkov, said a few years ago, we are not meddling into your elections and referendums. We are meddling within your brain. And that they do very successfully. We are not paying enough attention to it. We need, as the Ukrainians would say, being optimistic and very proactive. We need to improve that, and we need to pay more attention, and we need to address our political leaders, agencies, government to dedicate more funds to it, more time, more attention. Otherwise, they will certainly win this space. Yeah, as one could imagine, it's extremely hard and hard to imagine until you're there. And even when you're there, there's somewhat of a surreal feeling that it's not really happening. For one thing, because if inclined to read certain stuff, there would be scenes from Erich Maria Remarque's novels, World War I, trenches, they're people with spades digging. Most of the time, soldiers spend digging. And this is not very 2024. But at the same time, in many, many places, there's a very good internet connection and Wi-Fi. Most places I was able to reach internet, and you can be sitting there checking your Telegram or posting videos, TikTok, doing pretty much anything, studying, writing, which is a very strange combination. Then my personal experience to some of the best, brightest, incredible people I have met, men and women in this world throughout my lifetime, are people in the Ukrainian army. And this is not your ordinary army. When people are talking about military, there's certain notions, certain stereotypes. This is not what you imagine. Of course, there was a professional army in Ukraine, like anywhere else. But on the 24th of February, 2022, major part of the brightest, bestest of Ukrainians volunteered to join the army, territorial defense or professional army, young, educated, speaking many languages, technologically advanced, creatively accomplished people joined as soldiers. And they've been there, whoever wasn't killed. A lot of people are killed. I have a lot of numbers in my phone contact list that are not here anymore who were killed, and it's very hard. But they are there, and you feel it, the atmosphere, like you would be having intellectual conversations in a trench. And not everybody is intellectual. There would be also farmers. There would be students. There would be people from all paths of life, all united in a intent to protect their loved ones, their lives, their freedom, democracy, the way they want to live and not be slaves. And this is a very special atmosphere. It's very inspiring. I always feel very inspired when I go there. And also, I don't know if that's the answer you're expecting, but these are my personal impressions. I'm always stunned at how life-loving the Ukrainian soldiers are. They're always well-fed, well-groomed animals, cats and dogs that they save. In one place near Vovchansk, which is intense fighting, 30 minutes after I left, the artillery position where we were working was destroyed by the Russian shell. I was interviewing people and one man picked up a little bug and then carefully carried it and placed it somewhere where somebody wouldn't step on it. And I mean, of course, not everybody constantly saving, they're not sentimental. But there's this respect for life that I see both in civilians and frontline cities and towns, because frontline is not just trenches. These are zero lines from which you could see the Russian positions. But say in Kherson or in Nikopol, which are civilian areas where just civilians reside, you can also see the Russian positions. They're so close. You could see in Kherson, you see the smoke coming out of them. You see, like if you take the binoculars by the river, you would see them moving sometimes. The same goes for Nikopol. This is frontline as far as I'm concerned as well. And the same goes there. People are gardening. They have beautiful flower beds, roses, fruit, vegetables. And the same you see at the zero line, like when you go inside the Ukrainian dugout, it's very nice. You know, it's cozy. They pay attention to little details. They're always very clean. And then, of course, I've never been to a Russian dugout when it was functioning, because I don't work on the other side. I've been to some that were abandoned by the Russians and recaptured by Ukrainians, and say in the Kharkov region. And their positions are so messy. It's like the exact opposite of that. So all these little details, to me as a writer, they speak sometimes more than anything of the spirit of the people. And of course, everybody understands, right, that it's extremely dangerous. You can die every single second. So how do people deal with the fear? And you speak about that to the soldiers. They usually say, the military say, that only idiots are not afraid. But I've heard some other very poignant opinions where people say, you know, if we get killed, fine. We get killed doing something that we care about. And these are not just like, you know, propaganda or high words. They feel it. They feel it in their core. Because at home, they have their mothers, fathers, children, girlfriends, boyfriends. And that is a lot. You know, like one dugout story that stays with me, one of many, is that very young boy, 21. I think he just turned 21, Andrei, at artillery position. He had this red sneakers that he was very proud of. He studied politics, and then he joined as a volunteer the first days of the war. And he was running around carrying the shells. He will be in the movie. Actually, he might be or he might not be. But anyway, and we kept corresponding a little bit. He wanted to see the pictures. He wanted to see the film. I wrote an article about their positions. I sent him the article. He wanted more. He was very, you know, vivacious, funny, like sending emojis. And the last exchange we had, he wrote like "Все буде добре," like everything will be all right, and a winky face. And next thing I know, he was killed. And like, it is very hard to reconcile that, you know, like it's young student, young kid, his whole life in front of him, the only son of, and that is just devastating. Yeah. A lot of my work is in Byline Times, you know, one of my major newspapers. I'm a freelance, so I also write for Euromaidan Press, which is a Ukrainian English language newspaper, which I really recommend. They're very objective, stellar stuff, great stories. I don't have enough time to write for them enough, but there are great stories there, so I really recommend it. Euromaidan Press. I post often on Twitter And I write for many other newspapers as a freelancer. I speak on radio shows, on TV shows. TVP World, Ukraine This Week by Don Arlas is a great show on Ukraine with a lot of great experts. And Don has been at front lines in trenches. We work together. He really understands the nature of the war in Ukraine. He's an American working for Polish television. I recommend the source and I comment for them quite a bit. Another Byline writer, Oscar Jari, also works for TVP World. That's a good source. Then I write for my American newspaper in my state. It's a smaller newspaper called Community Alliance in Fresno. And I do a monthly column from different place every time. So you can find my work there. And just, if you are on Twitter, I share there every day. I'm not in love with Twitter. I don't like it as anybody else, but it seems to be doing the job. I started Blue Sky, still just testing the waters. Facebook is pretty useless. And yeah, but I mean, I put the links to all my work on X for now, and wherever we all migrate, I'll let you know. One thing that I would like to mention here is that thank you for being here, for listening, for taking time. There's so many wars, conflicts, natural disasters going on in this world, and it's so easy to get distracted or just tired and fatigued and not pay attention. But as my very good Ukrainian friend Natalia says, if you're not interested in politics, it's only until politics is interested in you. Right now, it's critical that we pay at least some attention to most of the events happening, and this war that will define our future, I go as far as saying a species, because it's a miniature of our world. If you are looking of ways to help Ukraine, again, you can always DM me the ways of that I'm sharing on X, or whatever way you decide to help. It's always appreciated by Ukrainian people. And since I've been based in Kherson, I call for everyone to check out Google Kherson, pay attention, or any other city that sparks your fancy. Thank you for supporting Ukraine and not giving up.